Good afternoon and good evening. My name is Jack Hopkins, and today I will be taking you through my project dissertation presentation. So first, let's go over the problem that I'm trying to solve with my dissertation. When it comes to creating towns and cities in video games, many of them will be meticulously designed with interesting layouts and locations, with the goal of them to making them feel lived in and a place that you as a player would want to explore and get lost in. A good example of this would be the recently released Cyberpunk 2077. However, if you were to have a game, what if you were to have a game that did not just have one city, but instead had a whole world filled with many different settlements, like some type of RPG along the lines of The Witcher 3? It would possibly bring up the question as a developer, is there a way to speed up this town creation process and possibly even automate it? This could be incredibly useful for indie game developers or small studio teams or a studio of smaller teams, as they may not have the resources to create all these towns individually. One way to speed up the process would be just to make one city but then copy and paste it over and over again. However, as you can probably guess, this would lead to the settlements feeling rather stale and boring, no longer encouraging the player to explore, because once they have seen one town, they have seen them all. Well, maybe we go on take another angle, another step. Maybe if we want to make the towns as different as possible, maybe we randomly generate the towns, all the objects inside and the placement of them inside a town, all the walls, all the buildings, all the people are just randomly generated, their positions are at least. However, as you can probably guess again, this would lead to a very chaotic mess, since the objects would be placed without any rhyme or reason. There always, at least with cities, there needs to be a certain logic that underpins that layout of the settlement, and this is the issue I'm trying to solve: the balance between these three different dynamics. This is where the objective of my dissertation comes in. The objective to create a software that automatically generates a town using a picture to dictate its layout. This means that a designer could draw and design an image and import it, and then the software would create the town for them. This allows them to have creative control while also speeding up the city creation process. When initially coming up with this idea, my mind was cast all the way back to Year 6 Geography, where we learned about land use models. These models were produced by geographers in the early 1900s as predictions for how cities will grow over the coming decades as they continue to expand. These models are largely abstractions and not very detailed, but the aspect I want to take away from them is the fact that they have these lovely coloured areas which represent certain types of buildings. So you have different sectors and different areas on these diagrams, and different buildings will pop up into them. And I thought to myself, well, what happens if we colour coordinated a town to say what types of buildings would randomly generate inside them? So maybe some nice housing would be in the upper class areas, and maybe some poor quality housing would be generated in the lower class residential areas, and so on. So we are kind of putting a little bit of restrictions on this randomness and adding a bit of structure to it. However, these maps were a little too random still, and I still wanted a little too abstract, and they didn't have enough detail I wanted. So I kind of went along to D&D maps and medieval style towns. As you can see in the bottom right hand corner, and even in the top right hand corner, these maps have a lot more detail on them. You can see walls, you can see individual buildings, individual houses and bushes and so on. And it's that level of detail that I kind of want to give control over to a designer, so they can just kind of put it in, they can design it a little bit and then put it into the software and it'll produce it for him. And the reason why I went with medieval towns is just because that shrinks the scope of the project a little bit. You could probably expand out to a city, but medieval towns just allow to still have a lot of a big range of different type of buildings. So you can have entertainment like tents, as you can see in the background here, or you can have big castles or churches or marketplaces and so on. You can have a lot of different variety there. And so medieval towns still give me that variety while also keeping it on the simpler side than a modern day city. So here's a combination of both of them. As you can see, we have still those color coordinated sectors that were in the land use models as before, but this time we show where the roads are, we show different sectors, and we have like maybe walls and buildings and rivers, and it's just a bit more defined, and hopefully basically you take an image kind of like this, put it into your my software, the project, and out pops a lovely generated city. So what have I done so far? Here is an image that is 180 pixels by 180 pixels, and in this the black lines represent the roads and the white buildings represent places where buildings can be built, and this is what I've done so far. As you can see, it's quite a chaotic mess. Buildings are overlapping each other and they're not, in straight lines and ordered and nicely, neatly done, but they are not on the black lines, and this is just the first step of many to creating this piece of software. So technologies are incredibly useful because they increase the potential that we are able to succeed in our goals, and one of the byproducts of increasing the chances of success is also reducing the occurrences and just reducing the risks. And so here are some certain technologies that I'm going to be using to reduce risks. One of the risks that can happen for me personally, I love art, I love getting into the nitty-gritty and drawing stuff, but this project is not about art. I'm not getting marked on art, and I want to focus on the programming. So this is why I got the Polygon Nights asset pack. Just has a wide range of buildings that I'm able to use, and I don't have to worry about doing art myself. Same thing with Unity, but Unity takes away a lot of the worry to do and the risks, and basically takes away my focus on smaller, lower level stuff, just like importing assets and all these other things, and help me focus on the actual generation of the city and the programming to do with that. Next is Git Bash or GitHub. If you are, in case there's always a risk that you can lose all the work you've done on your hard drives, and so storing it on a server allows me to pull it down. So even if my house gets burgled and my laptop gets stolen or my hard drives get just destroyed, I'll always still have all the work I've done because I'm constantly updating it on GitHub. Next is Trello. Time management is really important, and having a Kanban style, Kanban sprint, Scrum style allows me to break down objects, put points onto them, those tasks, and kind of put them into the sprint and monitor how fast I'm going through all these things, how accurate I'm being in terms of my speed, and understanding how much effort a singular task is taking, and allows me to be agile and kind of make adaptations while actually doing the project itself. And Blender, I'm just using that just in case if I can't find anything I want on the Unity asset store or in the Polygon Nights asset. So if I just want to create like a cube quickly, or I don't know, something like that, Blender can do that just fine. So here's a very not very detailed, frankly, plan I have for my project, but the idea is that by the different dates where I have to actually submit a big piece of work, I would have hopefully gone into this stage in the project. So the project proposal, while doing that, I would also have also implemented the roads and buildings and a moving camera. And on the 26th of March, I would also have implemented the walls, rivers, and multiple cities. Basically just finished the project. So you can walk around the world, and when I demonstrate it to you, you'll be able to be like, oh, look at that, he's walking around the world, and you can see different types of cities based on different types of images. Here's a picture of my Trello, how I'm going to just manage it. As you can see, I've got points, I've got different streams which you put stuff in. So I've got the backlog, the sprint, the doing, complete for sprint, and completed, typical kind of sprint Kanban stuff. Then I've got the product and functionality. What should you expect when I come and demonstrate it for you in March? That basically allows for any picture of the correct format to be used to dictate a town and city layout. To customize the color scheme, so say if you want the roads to not be colored represented as the color black, but instead represented as red, you can put that there, and you can customize that yourself, giving that freedom to the designer. Being flexible with the models used, so you don't need to use the Polygon Nights pack, you can use any pack you want. and then having a sensible and tidy city layout. As you kind of walk around, there shouldn't be like loads of buildings merging into each other and all this stuff. It should feel like an actual world that you lived in. And then finally, spawning multiple towns in one world. So you can actually create a whole world from this. And that's the goal, to speed up that process of video game city creation. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed it. There will be references at the end here. There you go. Thank you.